What if the groceries you buy every single week suddenly cost twice as much just a few months from now? Imagine walking into your local supermarket this fall, grabbing the same bag of rice, the same bottle of cooking oil, a few cans of vegetables, and your favorite coffee, only to discover your total bill has doubled. Not because you bought more, but because prices quietly climbed while everyone was distracted. It may sound dramatic, but history has shown us that food prices can change much faster than most people expect. Supply chain disruptions, severe weather, disease outbreaks affecting livestock, rising transportation costs, inflation, and international conflicts have all pushed grocery prices higher before. And as we move closer to winter 2026, many experts continue warning that several everyday foods remain vulnerable to sudden price spikes. The smartest preppers don't wait until store shelves look empty. They prepare while prices are still manageable. Because once panic buying begins, it's already too late. Today's video covers 10 foods that could potentially double in price before winter 2026 if current trends continue. These aren't luxury items. They're everyday staples found in millions of kitchens across America. Some last for years in storage. Others become incredibly difficult to replace once shortages begin. And here's the important part. This isn't about fear. It's about being prepared before everyone else realizes what's happening. Even buying just one extra item during each shopping trip can build a stockpile that protects your family from future price shocks. Small steps taken today often make the biggest difference tomorrow. As we count down from number 15 to number 1, you'll discover which foods face the greatest risk, why they're becoming more vulnerable, and how experienced preppers are getting ahead of rising costs without breaking their budgets. Some of the items later in today's countdown might surprise you because they're products most people never imagined becoming expensive, until suddenly they are. So don't skip ahead. Each item builds a bigger picture of what's happening inside today's food supply chain. And before we begin, if you enjoy practical preparedness, smart stockpiling strategies, emergency food storage tips, and staying one step ahead of uncertain times, make sure to subscribe to Prepper Pulse and turn on notifications. We post new videos designed to help you prepare wisely, save money, and protect your family before emergencies happen, not after. Now, let's begin with food number 10. Number 10, cooking oil. It may not be the first item people think about when preparing for rising food prices, but cooking oil has repeatedly proven how quickly an everyday kitchen essential can become surprisingly expensive. Whether it's vegetable oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, or olive oil, nearly every household depends on some type of cooking oil almost every day. It's used for frying, baking, sautéing, making salad dressings, and preserving certain foods. Without it, preparing many of your favorite meals becomes much more difficult. The problem is that cooking oil prices are influenced by far more than just local farming. A single poor harvest in one part of the world can ripple across global markets. Extended droughts, floods, wildfires, plant diseases, fertilizer shortages, rising fuel prices, labor shortages, and shipping delays all increase production costs. When multiple problems happen at the same time, grocery stores often pass those higher costs directly to consumers. We've seen this happen before. In recent years, several major vegetable oil markets experienced dramatic price increases after poor crop yields and disruptions in international exports. Consumers who were used to paying one price suddenly found themselves spending significantly more for the exact same bottle only months later. Winter can add another layer of pressure. As colder weather approaches, transportation becomes more expensive in many regions. Storms can delay deliveries. Fuel costs often increase, and demand for shelf-stable pantry items rises as families prepare for the holiday season and potential winter emergencies. Many shoppers don't notice these gradual increases until they compare today's receipt with one from 6 months earlier. Experienced preppers pay attention much sooner. Instead of waiting for prices to spike, they slowly build a reserve while shelves remain full and sales are still common. The key word is slowly. You don't need to buy 20 bottles in one shopping trip. Instead, add one extra bottle whenever you find a good sale. Over several months, that small habit can create a comfortable supply without putting pressure on your grocery budget. Storage is just as important as purchasing. Cooking oil lasts longest when kept in its original sealed container, stored in a cool, dry, and dark place away from direct sunlight and excessive heat. High temperatures and exposure to light speed up oxidation, which causes oil to lose quality and eventually develop an unpleasant smell or taste. It's also smart to rotate your supply. Use the oldest bottle first and replace it with a new one. This simple first in, first out system helps ensure your emergency pantry stays fresh and minimizes waste. Another mistake many people make is relying on only one type of oil. Different oils serve different purposes. Vegetable oil is versatile for general cooking. Olive oil is excellent for low to medium heat and cold dishes. Canola oil has a neutral flavor that works well in baking. Having a small variety gives you more flexibility if one type suddenly becomes difficult to find. And remember, if prices really begin climbing, restaurants and food manufacturers also compete for the same supplies. Increased commercial demand can put even more pressure on retail inventories, leaving ordinary shoppers with fewer choices and higher prices. That's why cooking oil earns a number 15 spot on today's list. It's affordable to stock now, essential for everyday cooking, and one of those pantry staples you'll almost certainly use regardless of what happens over the coming months. And if this first item surprised you, the next food on our countdown is even more vulnerable to sudden price swings. Because unlike cooking oil, its supply depends heavily on factors that are becoming harder to predict every single year. Number 9. Rice. For billions of people around the world, rice isn't just another food. It's a foundation of daily meals. It's affordable, filling, easy to prepare, and incredibly versatile. Whether you're making soups, casseroles, stir-fries, burrito bowls, or simple emergency meals, rice stretches almost any recipe further while keeping costs low. That's exactly why it's one of the first foods experienced preppers choose to stock. But here's the problem. Rice may seem like a product that's always available, yet its price is surprisingly sensitive to global events. Unlike many foods that are grown in multiple climates year-round, rice production depends heavily on stable weather patterns, reliable water supplies, healthy harvests, and international trade. When even one of those factors is disrupted, the effects can spread far beyond the countries where the rice is grown. Over the past several years, rice-producing regions have faced recurring droughts, flooding, extreme heat, and unpredictable growing seasons. Water shortages have made irrigation more difficult in some areas, while heavy rains have damaged crops in others. At the same time, higher fertilizer prices, rising fuel costs, and more expensive transportation have increased the overall cost of getting rice on a farm to store shelves. Then there's another issue many shoppers overlook. Governments sometimes limit rice exports when they want to protect their own domestic food supplies. If one major exporting country decides to keep more rice at home, buyers around the world suddenly compete for a smaller global supply. That competition can push prices higher in a very short period of time. Most families don't pay attention to those headlines. They simply notice that the 20-pound bag they used to buy every month suddenly costs several dollars more. Then a few weeks later, it costs even more. By the time panic buying begins, the larger bags are often the first to disappear because shoppers know they're getting a better value. That's why preppers don't wait for the news to tell them food prices are rising. They prepare before shortages become obvious. One of the biggest advantages of rice is its incredible storage potential. When kept dry and protected from moisture, insects, and extreme temperatures, certain varieties, especially white rice, can remain usable for many years with proper long-term storage. That makes it one of the best investments for anyone building an emergency pantry. Brown rice, however, is different. Because it contains more natural oils, it has a much shorter shelf life and should be rotated more frequently. Many new preppers make the mistake of buying large amounts of brown rice without realizing it won't store nearly as long as white rice. Another smart strategy is to avoid relying on only one bag. Instead of purchasing everything at once, consider adding one extra bag during normal grocery trips whenever prices are reasonable or sales appear. Over time, you'll build a dependable reserve without placing unnecessary strain on your budget. Rice also pairs well with nearly every other emergency food. Beans, canned vegetables, freeze-dried meals, canned chicken, tuna, Spam. Even simple seasonings can transform rice into dozens of different meals, helping reduce food fatigue during long emergencies. And don't underestimate its value if inflation accelerates. A pantry stocked with basic staples like rice gives you flexibility. Instead of paying whatever price the grocery store demands, you'll have time to wait for better deals while using the food you've already stored. That's exactly the kind of financial cushion experienced preppers try to build, because preparedness isn't just about surviving disasters. It's about protecting your family from unnecessary spending when everyday essentials become unexpectedly expensive. Rice earns a number 14 spot because it's one of the world's most dependable pantry staples, but it's also one of the foods most vulnerable to weather disruptions, global demand, and international trade issues. And if you think a bag of rice becoming expensive would be frustrating, just wait until you see the next item on our countdown. It's something millions of Americans use every single morning. Yet very few people realize how vulnerable its supply has become. Number 8. Coffee. For millions of people, the day doesn't truly begin until that first cup of coffee. It's a daily ritual, a source of comfort. For some, it's practically a necessity. But coffee is also one of the most climate-sensitive crops in the world, making it especially vulnerable to price swings. And as we head toward winter 2026, several factors continue putting pressure on global coffee supplies. Unlike many crops that can be grown across a wide range of environments, coffee requires very specific conditions. The plants thrive within a narrow temperature range and depend on consistent rainfall throughout the growing season. When those conditions change, even slightly, production can suffer. A severe drought can reduce harvest yields. Unexpected frost can damage entire plantations. Excessive rainfall can encourage plant diseases and make harvesting more difficult. Extreme heat can stress coffee trees, reducing both the quantity and quality of the beans they produce. And these aren't just theoretical risks. Major coffee-producing regions have experienced repeated weather-related challenges in recent years, forcing growers to deal with lower yields and rising production costs. At the same time, labor shortages, higher fertilizer prices, and increased shipping expenses have added even more pressure to the market. By the time those costs reach grocery stores, consumers are the ones paying the difference. Many people assume coffee prices rise gradually. Sometimes they do. But history has shown that coffee can experience sharp price increases in surprisingly short periods, especially after poor harvests or disruptions in major exporting countries. That's why experienced preppers don't look at coffee as just another luxury item. For households that drink coffee every day, it becomes part of their preparedness plan. Think about it. If grocery prices suddenly surge and you're already dealing with higher costs for meat, dairy, and produce, paying significantly more for coffee only adds to the financial strain. Having several months' worth stored at home gives you one less thing to worry about. Instant coffee is one of the easiest options for long-term storage. It's compact, lightweight, and often stays fresh for years when unopened. Whole coffee beans generally keep their flavor longer than pre-ground coffee, especially when stored in airtight containers away from heat, moisture, and direct sunlight. Ground coffee can also last a long time if left sealed in its original packaging, but once opened, freshness begins to decline much more quickly. Some preppers even vacuum seal coffee into smaller portions. That way, they only open what they'll use over the next week or two while keeping the rest protected from air and humidity. Another smart habit is rotating your supply. Instead of saving your oldest coffee until it's nearly expired, use it regularly and replace it with fresh purchases. This keeps your stockpile fresh while spreading out the cost over time. Coffee also has another advantage that many people overlook. During stressful situations, familiar routines matter. Whether it's a severe winter storm, an extended power outage, or a period of economic uncertainty, small comforts can have a surprisingly positive impact on morale. Sitting down with a warm cup of coffee in the morning can provide a sense of normalcy when everything else feels uncertain. That's one reason seasoned preppers often store more than just calories. They store items that support both physical needs and emotional well-being. And if you're not a coffee drinker, consider tea, hot cocoa, or other beverages your family enjoys. The goal isn't to stockpile products you'll never use. It's to prepare with the items that fit your everyday lifestyle. Coffee takes the number 13 spot because it's an everyday staple for millions of households. Yet its supply depends on weather, global trade, transportation, and agricultural conditions that remain unpredictable. The result? A product that seems ordinary today could become noticeably more expensive by the time winter arrives. And the next item on our list may be even more concerning. Unlike coffee, it's a basic source of protein found in countless refrigerators across America. And when its price climbs, nearly every family's grocery budget feels the impact. Number 7. Eggs. Few foods deliver as much value for the price as eggs. They're packed with protein, incredibly versatile, and one of the most affordable ingredients in most grocery stores, at least when supply remains stable. You can scramble them for breakfast, hard-boil them for quick snacks, use them in baking, add them to fried rice, mix them into casseroles, or turn a few simple ingredients into a complete meal. That's why eggs have earned a permanent place in millions of American kitchens. But if there's one grocery item that has proven just how fast prices can skyrocket, it's eggs. Many shoppers still remember walking into stores and seeing cartons that once cost just a few dollars suddenly selling for 2, 3, or even 4 times their normal price. In some areas, shelves were picked clean before noon, leaving customers to visit multiple stores just to find a single carton. What caused those dramatic increases? It wasn't one single problem. It was several challenges happening at once. Disease outbreaks affecting poultry flocks forced farmers to cull millions of laying hens to help prevent further spread. Fewer hens meant fewer eggs reaching grocery stores. At the same time, higher feed costs, rising fuel prices, increased labor expenses, and transportation costs all push production costs even higher. When supply drops and demand stays the same, prices rarely stay low for long. And rebuilding the nation's egg supply isn't something that happens overnight. Replacing laying hens takes time. Farmers must raise new birds before they begin producing eggs consistently, meaning shortages can last much longer than many people expect. Winter can add even more pressure. Cold weather often increases household demand as families bake more frequently during the holiday season. Restaurants, bakeries, and food manufacturers also require large quantities of eggs, creating additional competition for available supplies. That's why experienced preppers don't assume today's low prices will last forever. Instead of waiting until everyone else notices a shortage, they think ahead. Now, unlike rice or canned goods, fresh eggs aren't ideal for long-term pantry storage. But that doesn't mean you're out of options. Many families extend their preparedness by keeping powdered eggs or freeze-dried eggs as part of their emergency food supply. While they may not completely replace fresh eggs for every recipe, they're excellent for baking, cooking, and emergency situations when fresh eggs become unavailable or too expensive. If you regularly eat fresh eggs, another practical strategy is simply budgeting for future price increases. When prices are low, the money you save compared to previous years can be set aside to help offset future spikes rather than catching you off guard. For those with the space, raising backyard chickens has also become increasingly popular in many communities. While it's certainly not practical for everyone, and it comes with its own responsibilities, it can provide an additional layer of food security for households that are able to do it legally and responsibly. Another lesson preppers have learned is not to rely too heavily on any single food source. If eggs suddenly become expensive, having alternatives like canned meats, dried beans, peanut butter, oats, yogurt, or protein-rich legumes can help you maintain a balanced diet without paying inflated prices. Preparedness is about flexibility. The more options you have, the less vulnerable you become when one product experiences a sudden shortage. Eggs are in the number 12 spot because they've already demonstrated how quickly a common grocery item can become scarce and expensive. Their price depends on factors ranging from animal health to feed costs and transportation, many of which remain unpredictable. For families living on a tight budget, even a modest increase in egg prices can make a noticeable difference over the course of a month. And if you think breakfast staples are vulnerable, the next item on our countdown affects nearly every meal of the day. It's one of the most important pantry essentials in America. Yet, few people realize how many factors influence its price until it starts disappearing from store shelves. Number 6. Flour. Take a look inside almost any kitchen, and there's a good chance you'll find at least one bag of flour tucked away in the pantry. It may not seem exciting, but flour is one of the most important ingredients in the modern food supply. It's used to make bread, tortillas, pancakes, biscuits, pizza dough, pasta, cookies, cakes, and countless other everyday foods. Even if you rarely bake from scratch, you're still consuming products that depend on flour almost every day. That's exactly why any significant increase in flour prices can have a ripple effect throughout the entire grocery store. When wheat becomes more expensive, it's not just the price of a bag of flour that goes up. Bread costs more. Pasta becomes more expensive. Bakery products increase in price. Frozen foods often become more costly. Even restaurants can raise menu prices because many of their recipes rely on wheat-based ingredients. In other words, flour isn't just a pantry staple. It's one of the building blocks of the food system. So, what could drive prices higher before winter 2026? Like many agricultural products, wheat production depends heavily on weather. A prolonged drought during the growing season can reduce yields. Excessive rainfall at harvest time can damage crops. Unexpected heat waves can lower both quality and production. Then there are the costs farmers face long before the wheat is harvested: fertilizer, diesel fuel, farm equipment maintenance, seeds, labor. Every increase in those expenses adds pressure to the final price consumers see at the checkout line. Transportation is another factor that's easy to overlook. A bag of flour doesn't magically appear on the grocery shelf. Wheat must be harvested, transported to processing facilities, milled into flour, packaged, shipped to distribution centers, and finally delivered to local stores. If fuel prices rise or transportation networks experience delays, every step of that journey becomes more expensive. And when multiple challenges happen at once, prices can climb much faster than people expect. This is why experienced preppers don't view flour as just another baking ingredient. They see it as a valuable pantry staple that supports dozens of inexpensive meals. Think about it. A simple bag of flour can become homemade bread, pizza dough, pancakes, biscuits, flatbread, dumplings, even thickening soups and stews. During times of inflation, the ability to prepare these foods at home can save a surprising amount of money compared to buying pre-made alternatives. Of course, flour does require proper storage. Many people make the mistake of leaving extra bags in a warm garage or damp basement, where moisture, insects, or fluctuating temperatures can shorten its shelf life. Instead, keep flour in a cool, dry location for longer storage. Many preppers transfer it into airtight food-grade containers with oxygen absorbers to help preserve freshness and protect it from pests. Rotation is also important. Use your oldest supply first, then replace it with fresh bags as part of your normal grocery routine. That way, nothing goes to waste and your pantry is always ready. Another useful strategy is learning a few basic recipes now rather than waiting for an emergency. Making bread or simple flatbreads isn't as complicated as many people think. But like any skill, it becomes easier with practice. If higher food prices arrive later this year, you'll already have the confidence to make affordable meals from ingredients you have on hand. Preparedness isn't only about storing food. It's also about developing practical skills that help stretch your grocery budget when times become more challenging. That's why flour claims the number 11 spot on today's countdown. It may look like one of the least exciting items in the store, but its importance reaches far beyond the baking aisle. When flour prices rise, the effects can be felt across dozens of other food categories, making it one of the most influential staples in any pantry. We've officially reached the halfway point of our list. And from this point forward, the foods become even more critical. The next item is found in nearly every refrigerator across America, and if its price continues to climb, families could find themselves paying significantly more for one of the most essential sources of nutrition in their daily lives. Number 5. Milk. We've reached the halfway point of our countdown, and now we're entering the foods that could have the biggest impact on the average family's grocery budget. At number 10 is milk. For many households, milk is more than just a drink. It's poured over cereal every morning, added to coffee, used in baking, mixed into mashed potatoes, stirred into soups and sauces, and serves as a foundation for countless recipes. Families with young children often consider it one of the last items they want to cut from their shopping list. That's exactly why rising milk prices are so noticeable. Unlike canned goods or dried staples, milk is highly perishable. Grocery stores need constant deliveries to keep shelves stocked, and dairy farmers work around the clock, because cows don't stop producing milk when transportation slows down or the weather turns bad. That makes the dairy supply chain especially sensitive to disruptions. If feed prices increase, dairy farmers spend more to care for their herds. If diesel fuel becomes more expensive, transporting milk from farms to processing plants costs more. If labor shortages affect farms or processing facilities, production can slow down. And when severe weather hits key dairy-producing regions, everything from feed production to transportation can be affected. Each of those costs may seem small on its own, but together, they can lead to noticeably higher prices at the grocery store. There's another factor many people don't think about. Milk isn't just sold as milk. It's a starting point for an entire range of dairy products, including cheese, butter, yogurt, cream, cottage cheese, ice cream, and countless processed foods. When raw milk becomes more expensive, the effects spread throughout multiple sections of the supermarket. One increase can trigger several others. That's why preppers pay attention to dairy prices, even if they don't drink a lot of milk themselves. Now, because fresh milk has a relatively short shelf life, it's not something most people can stockpile in large quantities. Instead, experienced preppers focus on practical alternatives. Shelf-stable ultra-high temperature, or UHT, milk can remain unopened for months without refrigeration, making a useful option for emergency storage. Powdered milk is another favorite among long-term preppers. While some people hesitate because of the taste, modern powdered milk works well in baking, cooking, and many recipes where fresh milk isn't absolutely necessary. It also provides an excellent backup during power outages or unexpected shortages. Evaporated milk is another versatile choice. It can be used in soups, sauces, casseroles, desserts, and many baking recipes, giving families additional flexibility if fresh dairy products become difficult to find. The goal isn't necessarily to replace fresh milk forever. It's to avoid being forced into paying inflated prices simply because you have no alternatives. Preparedness gives you options. Imagine walking into the grocery store during a period of rising prices. Instead of worrying because milk costs far more than expected, you already have shelf-stable options waiting at home. That means you can buy fresh milk only when prices make sense, rather than out of necessity. That's one of the biggest advantages of building a well-rounded pantry. It gives you breathing room. And breathing room often translates into significant savings over time. Milk earns the number 10 spot because it's an everyday essential with a supply chain that's vulnerable to rising production costs, transportation challenges, and changing weather conditions. Since so many other dairy products depend on it, even a moderate increase in milk prices can ripple across your entire grocery bill. But if milk becomes expensive, there's another staple that's often hit even harder. The next item has been a comfort food for generations, appears in everything from sandwiches to holiday dinners, and has a history of surprising shoppers with dramatic price increases when supply can't keep up with demand. Number 4, cheese. For many families, cheese is one of those foods that's always on the shopping list. It goes into sandwiches, burgers, tacos, casseroles, omelets, homemade pizzas, macaroni and cheese salads, and countless other meals. Whether it's cheddar, mozzarella, Swiss, Monterey Jack, or Parmesan, cheese has become a staple in American kitchens. But it's also one of the easiest grocery items to underestimate. Most people assume cheese prices rise slowly over time. The reality is much different. Because cheese depends entirely on the dairy industry, it's affected by many of the same challenges we discussed with milk, but with a few additional complications. First, cheese requires large amounts of milk to produce. Depending on the variety, it can take roughly 10 pounds of milk to make just 1 pound of cheese. That means if milk production becomes more expensive, cheese manufacturers feel that increase immediately. But that's only the beginning. Making cheese is a time-intensive process. Many varieties must be aged under carefully controlled conditions for weeks, months, or even years before they're ready for sale. During that time, producers continue paying for storage, refrigeration, labor, and energy. If electricity costs rise, if transportation becomes more expensive, or if packaging materials increase in price, those added expenses eventually find their way to grocery store shelves. There's also the issue of demand. Cheese isn't just purchased by families. Restaurants use enormous quantities every day. Pizza chains, fast food restaurants, hotels, schools, hospitals, food manufacturers. When demand in these industries remains strong while supply tightens, retail shoppers often end up paying significantly more. Experienced preppers understand that some food shortages don't happen because products disappear completely. Instead, they become too expensive for many families to buy comfortably. That's an important distinction. A fully stocked grocery shelf doesn't necessarily mean food is affordable, and affordability is a major part of preparedness. Now, unlike fresh milk, certain cheeses store surprisingly well. Hard cheeses generally last longer than soft varieties when refrigerated properly, and unopened blocks often keep much longer than shredded cheese, which has more surface area exposed to air. Some preppers also include canned cheese products or shelf-stable cheese spreads as part of their emergency pantry. While they may not replace fresh cheese for every meal, they provide a practical alternative during emergencies or periods of unusually high prices. Another smart strategy is freezing cheese. Many hard cheeses freeze reasonably well for cooking purposes, even if the texture changes slightly after thawing. If you find a great sale, buy an extra block or two, and freezing can save money later, especially if prices begin climbing over the winter months. And remember, preparedness doesn't always mean buying huge quantities. Sometimes it's simply recognizing when prices are unusually low and taking advantage of those opportunities before they're gone. That's how experienced shoppers stay ahead. They don't chase shortages. They prepare before shortages become obvious. Cheese also has another benefit in an emergency pantry. It adds flavor and variety. When you're relying on simple foods like rice, beans, pasta, or potatoes, a small amount of cheese can transform an ordinary meal into something much more satisfying. That variety becomes surprisingly important during extended emergencies, helping reduce menu fatigue and keeping morale higher. Cheese claims the number 9 spot because it's tied directly to dairy production, energy costs, transportation, and strong consumer demand. Even modest disruptions in any of those areas can lead to noticeable price increases at the checkout counter. And now we're entering the top 8. The next food isn't just a pantry staple. It's one of the world's most important sources of protein. If its price begins climbing sharply, millions of families will immediately feel the impact because it's one of the most frequently purchased foods in the grocery store. Number 3, chicken. If you ask the average shopper which meat they buy most often, there's a good chance the answer will be chicken. It's affordable compared to many other proteins, easy to cook, and incredibly versatile. From grilled chicken breasts and roasted drumsticks to soups, casseroles, tacos, sandwiches, and stir-fries, chicken appears on dinner tables across America almost every single day. That's exactly why it's so important. When chicken prices rise, millions of grocery budgets feel the impact almost immediately. Unlike some specialty meats, chicken isn't a luxury purchase. It's a staple, and because demand remains consistently high, even a small disruption in supply can create noticeable price increases. One of the biggest challenges facing the poultry industry is disease. Outbreaks affecting commercial flocks can force producers to remove large numbers of birds to help prevent further spread. While these actions are necessary to protect the industry, they also reduce the number of chickens available for processing. Less supply, combined with steady demand, almost always leads to higher prices. But disease isn't the only concern. Raising chickens has become more expensive in recent years. Feed prices remain one of the largest costs for poultry farmers. Corn and soybean meal, 2 major ingredients in chicken feed, can fluctuate significantly depending on weather conditions, harvest yields, fertilizer costs, and global commodity markets. When feed becomes more expensive, farmers face difficult choices. Either absorb the additional costs or pass them along through higher prices. Most eventually have no choice but to raise prices. Transportation also plays a major role. Chicken must be processed, refrigerated, shipped, and delivered quickly to maintain food safety. Rising fuel costs, labor shortages, and transportation delays all add expenses throughout that journey. Then there's consumer behavior. When beef becomes too expensive, many families switch to chicken because it's usually the more affordable option. That sounds reasonable. But when millions of households make the same decision, demand for chicken increases even further. More buyers competing for the same supply often pushes prices even higher. It's a cycle that's easy to overlook until you're standing in front of the meat case wondering why the family pack you bought a few months ago suddenly costs much more. Experienced preppers prepare for exactly these situations. Rather than depending entirely on fresh meat, they diversify their protein sources. Canned chicken is one of the most popular options. It stores for years, requires no refrigeration until opened, and can be added to soups, pasta dishes, casseroles, sandwiches, salads, and emergency meals with very little preparation. Freeze-dried chicken is another favorite for long-term emergency storage. While it's more expensive up front, it offers an exceptionally long shelf life and can be rehydrated when needed. Even keeping a small reserve of frozen chicken, rotated regularly as part of your normal meal planning, can help reduce the impact of sudden price spikes. The key is flexibility. If grocery prices jump next month, you're not forced to pay the highest price because you already have options waiting at home. That's the advantage of thinking ahead. Another lesson seasoned preppers understand is that no single food should carry your entire preparedness plan. Chicken is an excellent source of protein, but it works best alongside canned fish, beans, lentils, peanut butter, shelf-stable dairy, and other long-lasting foods. A diverse pantry is far more resilient than one built around a single ingredient. Chicken earns a number 8 spot because it's one of America's most widely consumed proteins. Yet its price depends on feed costs, transportation, animal health, labor, and consumer demand, all factors that can change quickly. And now we're moving into the top 7. The next food has been a breakfast favorite for generations, but it's also one of the most weather-dependent crops on the planet. If harvest conditions continue to worsen, shoppers could soon be paying far more for something many people pour into a bowl every single morning. Number 2, sugar. We've officially reached the top 5, and this is where the list starts affecting far more than just the foods themselves. At number 5 is sugar. Most people think of sugar as something they add to coffee, tea, or desserts. But the truth is, sugar is woven into the modern food supply. It's found in breakfast cereals, bread, yogurt, sauces, ketchup, canned fruit, baked goods, soft drinks, sports drinks, candy, jams, peanut butter, frozen meals, and thousands of processed foods lining grocery store shelves. That means when sugar becomes more expensive, the impact extends far beyond the baking aisle. So why could sugar prices climb sharply before winter 2026? The answer begins on the farm. Sugar comes primarily from 2 crops, sugarcane and sugar beets. Both are highly dependent on favorable weather conditions. Extended droughts can reduce yields. Heavy rainfall can delay harvesting. Hurricanes can damage sugarcane fields in coastal regions. Unexpected freezes can harm crops before they're ready to be processed. When harvests decline, global supplies tighten. But weather is only part of the equation. Growing, harvesting, and processing sugar requires significant amounts of fuel and energy. Heavy machinery operates in the fields. Processing facilities consume large amounts of electricity, and finished products must be transported across long distances before reaching grocery stores. If diesel prices increase, if electricity becomes more expensive, or if transportation networks face delays, every stage of production becomes more costly, and eventually, consumers see those higher costs reflected on store shelves. There's another reason experienced preppers pay close attention to sugar. It isn't just a sweetener. It's also a preservation tool. For generations, families have used sugar to make homemade jams, jellies, fruit preserves, and syrups. During harvest season, many people rely on sugar to preserve fruits that would otherwise spoil quickly. If sugar prices rise significantly, home food preservation becomes more expensive as well. That creates a ripple effect many shoppers never consider. Preparedness isn't just about storing food. It's also about preserving it. Now, unlike fresh produce or dairy products, white granulated sugar has one major advantage. When stored properly, it has an exceptionally long shelf life. Because sugar naturally resists bacterial growth when kept dry, it doesn't spoil in the same way many other foods do. The biggest enemies are moisture and contamination. If sugar absorbs water, it can harden into solid blocks or develop clumps that make it more difficult to use. That's why experienced preppers keep it in airtight containers in a cool, dry location. Another important point is rotation. Even though sugar lasts for a very long time, using your oldest supply first helps keep your pantry organized and prevents unnecessary waste. And remember, You don't need to fill an entire room with sugar. Preparedness is about realistic planning. A few extra bags purchased gradually during regular shopping trips can provide months of flexibility if prices suddenly spike. Sugar also becomes a valuable barter item during prolonged emergencies. People often focus on storing only survival foods, but history has shown that familiar comforts, coffee, tea, chocolate, spices, and sugar, can become highly desirable when supply chains are disrupted. That's one reason seasoned preppers build a pantry that supports both survival and everyday living, because emergencies don't erase human nature. People still crave familiar foods and routines. Sugar earns a number 5 spot because it's one of the most widely used ingredients in the food industry. Rising production costs, weather-related crop challenges, transportation expenses, and global demand all have the potential to push prices higher before winter. And now we're entering the final stretch. The next item is one of the most important sources of protein in the American diet. It's often considered a premium purchase, but if current trends continue, it could become an even bigger luxury for many families by the time cold weather arrives. Number 1. Wheat, the hidden foundation of everything. At number 1 is the most important and most overlooked food in the entire modern diet: wheat. Most people don't think about wheat directly. They think about what it becomes: bread, pasta, flour, breakfast cereals, crackers, cookies, cakes, pastries, pizza dough, tortillas, and countless processed foods that fill supermarket shelves. But underneath all of it is wheat. That's why wheat sits at the very center of the global food system. If wheat prices rise significantly, the effects don't stay isolated to one product. They spread across nearly every aisle in the grocery store. Because wheat is not just a food, it's a foundation ingredient. So why could wheat become more expensive before winter 2026? The answer is a combination of factors that often build quietly in the background. First, wheat is extremely dependent on weather stability. Droughts in key growing regions can reduce yields dramatically. Floods can damage crops before harvest. Heat waves during critical growth stages can reduce grain quality and output. Even small shifts in seasonal patterns can have large effects when scaled across global production. Second, wheat is heavily influenced by global trade and supply chain stability. Wheat is grown in multiple countries and shipped internationally in massive quantities. That means political instability, export restrictions, transportation delays, or rising fuel costs in just a few major exporting regions can affect global availability. If one major supplier reduces exports, even temporarily, other countries must compete for a smaller supply. That competition often leads to higher prices everywhere. Third, production costs continue to rise. Farmers face increasing expenses for fertilizer, diesel fuel, machinery maintenance, seeds, storage, and labor. Even if harvests remain stable, those rising costs can still push market prices upward. And because wheat is traded globally as a commodity, even small shifts in supply and demand can create noticeable price changes. Now here's what makes wheat especially important for everyday consumers. You rarely buy wheat directly, but you buy it constantly in other forms. That means price changes don't feel like a single increase. They feel like everything becoming more expensive at once. Bread goes up, pasta goes up, cereal goes up, baked goods go up. Fast food becomes more expensive. Even packaged snacks and frozen meals are affected. It creates a ripple effect across the entire food system. That's why experienced preppers pay close attention to wheat markets, even if they don't fully follow commodity news. They understand that wheat is a hidden driver of grocery inflation. When wheat becomes unstable, everything built on top of it becomes unstable too. Now, from a preparedness standpoint, wheat is also one of the most useful long-term storage staples available. When properly stored in airtight containers with protection from moisture, pests, and heat, whole wheat berries can last for many years. Many preppers choose to store wheat in its whole form and grind it as needed, allowing for longer shelf life and better control over freshness. Flour, while more convenient, generally has a shorter storage life compared to whole grains, which is why long-term preparedness plans often include both. Wheat-based foods also offer flexibility. With basic ingredients like water, salt, and yeast, wheat can be transformed into bread, flatbreads, noodles, and countless other meals that provide calories and energy during difficult times. But perhaps the most important lesson about wheat is this. It doesn't feel important until it becomes expensive, and when it does, it affects almost everything people eat. That's why wheat holds the #1 position on this list of foods that could double in price before winter 2026. Because if wheat becomes unstable, the entire food system feels it. If you found this video helpful, make sure to subscribe to Prepper Pulse for more practical survival insights, food store strategies, and real-world preparedness updates. The goal is simple. Help you stay ahead before problems become emergencies. Stay prepared, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next one.